on defense, I look up front at the pass rush situation. They hit the home run last year with Hutchinson, but Hutchinson's a guy that you can kind of use anywhere. And James Houston was just an incredible. I don't even know how to compare what he did last year with the limited amount of snaps he had. The fact that he's not big, so it's about pure speed and athleticism. And for him to have the amount of sacks and production he had, you just can't count on that again. You can just hope, but my meaning here is I think they still need some more edge rush help. I think that's going to be important, and maybe even more important, I think they also, because they can't count on a Wuzuriki. That I think ship might have even sailed. I mean, we're not even sure if he's ever going to play again. So and Paschal is a nice player, but he's a rotational type guy. McNeil did a really good job. Kaminsky's a nice leader, but they could definitely use like another guy up front. But if I'm looking at that front seven, first of all, that's what we're going to start off with. Edge rusher might be the way to go as well.
Yeah, on defensive line, I agree with you up front. Just looking at the depth chart right now, I do think John Kaminsky gets a little bit of a bad rap. I mean, as a pass rusher, too, we know he's a premier run defender on the outside. He sets the edge very well, but he only had 10 less pressures than Hutchinson last year, despite 200 fewer pass rush opportunities. So he was on the field a lot less than Aiden was in pass rush situations, and he almost applied as much pressure as Hutchinson did. And then you throw in, like you said, Paschal, Charles Harris, even, again, not guys that you're going to make draft decisions on, but maybe at the top of the draft, if you have equal grades, inside, outside guys, I'm leaning inside first because I don't want Aleem McNeil to be my premier inside rusher. He can do it because he's powerful, bull rusher. We've seen some D tackles evolve that started off as run defenders, and they got so good at bull rushing that they developed a pass rush repertoire. But a guy that big, that body type, I don't want him on the field that often. I want him seeing 50 to 60% of the snaps, and the opportunity to bring him off the field would be short passing situations. But you look at this roster, I mean, who are you bringing on the field in place of him? So I think you're going to end up overplaying this guy. And like you said, I'm not going to rely on Levi coming back. And if he does, it's icing on the cake.
Yes.
So if there's one need that I see the most on this team overall, it's on that defensive line and specifically a D tackle. Now, like you said, the advantage they have with Kaminsky and Hutchinson is they can shift inside. So you don't, if you are really only looking for a pass rusher to add to the interior, you can go get your edge rusher and move one or both of these guys inside, problem solved, right? But if there is something that lines up schematically and personnel, I think D tackle would be the smart way to go. The kid from Northwestern just keeps popping my head. I was asked last night, who's going to be the surprise top 10 pick? Right? And I think it's the kid from Northwestern, if I had to pick one.
Okay.
And this is the team I could see it happening
so
on.
So he fits that model, too, of Dan Campbell and what he's looking for?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. I mean, this is, if you guys don't believe me, go check it out yourself. He is Aaron Donald reincarnated physically. Not saying he's going to be one of the best pass rushers of all time. Just the measurements, the speed. This kid, he's got better length and better speed. And Aaron Donald is slowly changing the game a little bit. I think a lot of teams are going to start looking for this 280 to 290-pound free tech that can just outmove everybody and disrupt the passing and rushing game respectively.
By the way, do you think that's because of the fact that so many teams are going to more of a zone approach? And so having a speedier guy in the middle is now something where you can use that guy to your advantage instead of just going mano a mano.
Right, because he beats guys to a spot.
Yes.
It's exactly it. I mean, no matter what, you're not going to find an offensive lineman that is as athletic as Aaron Donald, and you're not going to find an offensive lineman as athletic as the kid from Northwestern. So it's just keep an eye on that spot. Every now and then I want to throw a little bit of a risk out there instead of just going with the norm. That's kind of boring, and I think that kid is a potential surprise top 10 pick to Detroit.
All right. Well, at corner, if everything goes well in the backfield, if everything goes well, you know what? The depth is much better this year, no question. Even if they just went into the season with what they have, it should be better. The problem is you're at that point now with Jeff Okudah where it's like, this is it. You got to show me or not. and they have not had the Jeff Okudah that they thought they were getting when they first picked him so far. Throw in the fact that even though Mosley is a nice pickup, just a guy. That's all he is. He's nothing special. The Cam Sutton deal was an excellent pickup at nickel. You get Walker hopefully healthy, but by picking up Gardner Johnson and the fact that Kirby Joseph was such a nice pickup last year, depending on now they use a lot of three safeties, so that's why it's important that Walker does come back to being the guy and the leader that he is for that secondary. But again, I'm using a little bit of ifs and hopes and stuff, which is why a number one corner is still potentially needed here, because I just doubt that all of a sudden Jeff Okudah is going to be the man. If he comes back and he plays and he can stay healthy, maybe he'll have a nice career in the NFL. I don't think he's ever going to live up to his draft status. So I think, but like we talked about, I don't necessarily think Detroit has to use that pick first. I think they can definitely, with all the depth we talked about, I think they could go ahead and grab one of those guys later if they wanted to.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I even think that Detroit's in a position, especially with another first-round pick just a few after, right, that if the quarterback market gets a little wacky at the top of this draft and someone ends up dropping, that's a spot where someone might want to trade up to. You might have a few teams competing for that spot. It's hard to, we're hearing rumors now that Bryce Young is going to be Carolina's guy. Houston might skip quarterback at number 2 because they don't love C.J. Stroud. If that starts to happen, that Houston might not love C.J. Stroud enough to pick him number 2. If Bryce Young goes number 1 to Carolina. Okay. Yep, and that's actually, I brought him up last time or 2 times ago that we talked, Lance Zierlein. He was the one that said, he was the first one, and then Mortensen said this yesterday, that Carolina is leaning Bryce Young and Houston is not gaga over C.J. Stroud.
So now all of a sudden Carolina is leaning towards Bryce Young.
Yep. This time of year, what do they always tell us, right? Don't believe anything here. So we'll see.
But yeah, we'll see. I don't believe it. No.
So if that does happen, that's why I'm just creating a scenario that if there's a quarterback situation where we see a couple guys fall, that number 5 spot might be ideal to trade down from.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And then on offense, look, keep saying it, but this team needs a number 1 tight end. And this draft has so many tight ends. They cannot ignore that position early. They have to grab one of these guys. Now, look, a lot is going to depend on not just the tight end position, but especially the future quarterback position. On what does this organization? What are they thinking about Ben Johnson's career? Like, do they feel like if they're looking around the landscape at the 32 teams in the NFL and say, all right, who could be fired next year? Could Ben Johnson leave us next year? Or do we have 2 more years with Ben Johnson? Because I think everybody knows by now that, especially if this team goes to the playoffs next year, which I think is going to happen, and I think you would agree, that he's, without question, he's going to be the top candidate for a head coaching job. Now, whether he finds the right spot and leaves, the reason I bring this up is because you're going to be drafting or thinking about drafting a quarterback. And I know there's some people who are saying, hey, Detroit should think about drafting Anthony Richardson. Stash a guy like Richardson. He needs to develop, you could develop him for a year and a half or something like that. But what if Johnson's not around? That's a big question. Because you're going to ask Johnson's advice, but what if Johnson just, all right, I'm a head coach somewhere in 2024, and you got his advice, and he liked him, but now he's not there to coach him. So that's a tricky situation, which I think might be a reason why Detroit will not go high for a quarterback, and why this is a good position for one of those second-tier quarterbacks. If you want to throw in Hendon Hooker, that's fine. Guys like that, where you're not swinging too early for the fences, but you bring in a guy anyway just to see whether or not he is someone that could eventually take over for Jared Goff. If Jared Goff does not, because not like Goff is old, but if Goff just turns out to be a guy that, you know what, he took a step up last year, that was nice, but he ain't going further than that. And now we're getting into the big games and playoff games, and he's failing us, and we know what we have here. Now we have to go higher than that. So those are 2 positions, because again, I bring up tight end because I don't know what Ben Johnson, how he values that tight end position in his offense enough. So if he does, then I don't think there's any question you're going to see a tight end picked up in the 1st or 2nd round.
Yeah, I mean, tight end's the top offensive need on this team. I don't think it's debatable at this point, especially with some of the other moves that they've made, and also the return of Jameson Williams, who got his feet wet last year. But now that you have a full offseason of not rehabbing an injury, they're set at receiver. They could, I mean, everyone could always use more depth there. Are you really sold on Josh Reynolds being a guy? Probably not, but
oh, they brought back Marvin Jones, huh?
Marvin Jones is back.
Okay, so yeah,
but,
that should solidify the depth now for the receivers.
Yeah, there's enough depth there to ignore it, and so you still always have to find ways to improve the passing game. All right, you're not going to touch quarterback like you said. I think the reason you have behind it is brilliant. You're probably not going to have your OC next year, so I say put it on hold. If you want to use a day 3 pick on a backup to compete with Nate Sudfeld, fine. See if you find lightning in a bottle there. But the tight end position. The idea that Ben Johnson does not value it, I don't believe it.
I would agree too. Yeah.
I think it has more to do with economics, that they didn't want to pay Hawkinson what they felt that they can pay a group of guys what they were paying Hawkinson and get similar production. But to say that they're not going to even look at one of these premier tight ends in the first round simply because they traded away Hawkinson, I just don't see it. And I think they're one of the favorites to pick the first tight end.
And because right now, where are they at 18?
They are, I think they're earlier than that.
Are they?
They are 18, yes. 18.
Okay, so they're 6 and 18. So at 6, see, the thing is with 6, they could definitely go with Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Because he'll be there.
Yes. He'll be there. So
that could be the first cornerback taken off, Gonzalez at 6. Oh, by the way, what if Jalen Carter's available?
Yeah, that would be a gift. Now, does he fit the Dan Campbell ethos? With the
Good
character. Point. That's a tough sell to me, especially a guy that looked like a slob at his pro day.
Good point.
There are certain coaches that they put a lot of value in.
As well, you should
working out and putting your best foot forward in interviews like that. So. I mean, on paper, it'd be a great decision, and it would be a great fit as well. But, personality-wise, I don't see the fit.
And when I was saying first-round tight end, I wasn't saying 6. So Detroit fans don't be going crazy, because I completely would understand why you would want to jump off the ship if you thought that Detroit would be picking a tight end at 6. But 18 is the perfect spot to pick a tight end. Is there a particular tight end that you think fits best for any reason? Or let's just say it's the first tight end off the board. Who do you think it's going to be?
Oh, I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, the one issue I see with the top 2 pass catchers on Detroit is they both had above average drop rates. And if I'm a tight end, if I'm drafting a tight end number 18, I don't need him to be a premier blocker, but I do want him to be a yard after catch guy, and I want him to have the best hands available among all the tight ends. And that's Dalton Kincaid.
And that's a Dan Campbell guy.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what. I think all 3 of these guys at the top. Darnell Washington, not completely sure about yet, but Musgrave, Meyer, and Kincaid, they're all Dan Campbell type guys. But in terms of skill set and what Detroit already has at tight end, Kincaid fits the bill.